The first sign something was truly wrong wasn't the silence, though God knows the deep winter silence of Blackwood National Park could be a beast all its own. No, it was the sound, or rather, the lack of a familiar one. Park Ranger Sarah Jenkins zipped her snowmobile across the pristine, unbroken expanse of Lake Oakhaven, the engine's roar usually swallowed by the vast, open space. Today, the roar felt amplified, almost obscene, against the unnatural quiet. No distant call of a raven, no rustle of snow-laden branches, no subtle crack of ice shifting underfoot. Just the shriek of the wind and the hum of her machine. Sarah had been stationed at Blackwood for 7 years, long enough to know its rhythms. Spring thaws, summer migrations, autumn hunts. Winter, especially, held its own harsh beauty, a time of stark survival that separated the resilient from the reckless. But this winter was different. A cold had descended unlike any she'd experienced. A biting, relentless chill that seemed to seep into the very marrow of the bones, making even her heavy-duty thermal gear feel inadequate. It wasn't just the temperature drop. It was an accompanying sense of dread that clung to the air like frost. The first reports had been scattered, dismissed as isolated incidents. A lone trapper, Old Man McGregor, hadn't checked in by his scheduled date. Hikers, experienced and well-equipped, vanished from marked trails. Then came the unsettling discoveries. A camp stove still flickering with a dying flame. A backpack abandoned next to a perfectly preserved set of snowshoes. A half-eaten can of beans beside a tent ripped from the inside. Not by an animal's claws, but by something else. Each incident devoid of the usual signs of struggle or animal predation. No blood, no tracks of large predators. Just an eerie void where a person had been. Superintendent Hayes, miles away in his heated office, blamed inexperience and unpredictable winter conditions. Sarah just gritted her teeth. She'd walked the trails, examined the sights. This wasn't nature's doing. This was something deliberate, something that left no trace but absence. And the pattern was emerging, chillingly clear. All the disappearances clustered around the oldest, most untamed sections of the park, deep within the ancient, whispering pines of the Northwood Sector, near the infamous Raven's Peak. The locals, the ones who had lived here for generations, didn't speak of bears or wolves anymore. Their eyes held a different, older fear when they mentioned the Northwood. They spoke in hushed tones of the hunger. Today's patrol was supposed to be a routine check of the northernmost ranger outpost, a small, isolated cabin rarely used in winter. It was more of a formality, a nod to procedure. But Sarah felt the pull, an undeniable sense of foreboding that urged her to go, to see for herself. She throttled the snowmobile, pushing it harder across the frozen lake. The sun, a pale, distant coin in the sky, offered no warmth, casting long, skeletal shadows of the pines on the snow. As she neared the far shore, where the dense forest began its climb towards Raven's Peak, she cut the engine. The sudden silence was deafening, a thick, suffocating blanket. She killed the lights, letting her eyes adjust to the muted winter light. That's when she heard it. A sound, faint at first, carried on the frigid air. Not the wind, not shifting ice. It was a low, guttural moan, a sound of immense suffering and profound hunger, stretched thin by the distance. It vibrated in her chest, a primal thrum that spoke of ancient, unspeakable things. Every instinct screamed at her to turn back, to flee. But her hand, steady despite the tremor in her heart, reached for the rifle strapped to her snowmobile. She was a ranger. This was her park, and something was deeply, terribly wrong within it. The sound, that low, wretched moan, faded as quickly as it had come, leaving behind a silence far more terrifying. It was the kind of quiet that meant you weren't alone. I dismounted the snowmobile, pulling the rifle free. The cold metal against my gloved hand was a grounding sensation. The outpost cabin lay about a quarter mile through the dense pines, a structure barely visible through the thick snow and the approaching twilight. My breath plumed in the frigid air, each exhalation a white cloud against the deepening grey. My every step was deliberate, each crunch of snow under my boots echoing too loudly in the stillness. I scanned the tree line, my eyes darting between the dark, vertical lines of the trunks, searching for any movement that wasn't the sway of a branch in the wind. The forest felt alive, but not with its usual life. It felt hungry. A gnawing sense of unease dug its claws into my gut, twisting with a familiar yet unwelcome cold dread. I'd faced bears, cougars, even rogue wolves in these woods, but this felt different, primal, and far, far older than any predator I knew. As I neared the cabin, the details sharpened. No smoke from the chimney, no light from the single window. The small snowdrift against the door was undisturbed, a blanket of pristine white that suggested no one had come or gone for days, maybe weeks. Yet, a faint sickly sweet smell, something metallic and cloying, hung heavy in the air, a scent that prickled the hairs on the back of my neck. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but once noticed, it became impossible to ignore, like the odor of a slaughterhouse, but deeper, fouler, mixed with something I couldn't place. I circled the cabin slowly, rifle still at the ready. The back window, usually boarded up tight for winter, was shattered. Not just broken, but a jagged starburst pattern, as if something incredibly strong had impacted it from the inside, or burst out with explosive force. Shards of glass glittered on the snow, but there was no blood, no fur, no typical signs of an animal breaking in or out, just the precise, terrifying damage. My flashlight beam cut through the dim interior, revealing a scene of quiet chaos. The table was overturned, chairs scattered. A map, neatly spread out before, was now crumpled and tossed into a corner. My heart hammered. This wasn't just abandoned. This was a forced departure, an instant terror. I pushed open the cabin door, which groaned on its frozen hinges, adding to the unnerving symphony of the silent woods. The metallic, sweet smell intensified, making my stomach churn. The air inside was colder than outside, a stale, dead cold that seeped into my bones. A cold that wasn't just from the lack of a fire. It was the cold of a tomb. On the floor, near the overturned table, I saw it. A single, small, perfectly carved wooden bird. It was the signature of Ranger Miller, the last person assigned to this outpost. He carved them for good luck, left them behind like calling cards. This one was broken cleanly in half, its delicate wings snapped, and beside it, pressed into the thin layer of dust on the floorboards, was a track. Not a boot print, not a paw print. It was long, narrow, with deeply gouged claw marks at what would have been the tips of toes, ending in something too long, too skeletal to be human. It looked like a deformed, elongated human foot, but twisted, like a caricature of starved anatomy. My blood ran cold. The old legends, the ones I dismissed as drunken ramblings, now screamed in my mind. The descriptions of things gaunt, emaciated, with elongated limbs and taloned feet, eyes that glowed with an eternal hunger. Wendigos. I'd always scoffed, told myself they were just stories for tourists. but the track on the floor, the eerie silence, the smell, it was all coalescing into a horrifying reality. This creature wasn't just a legend, it was real, and it was here. I felt its presence, a chilling awareness that made every hair on my body stand on end. I was deep in its territory, alone, and it knew I was here. The hunt had begun. The fear, cold and sharp, was a physical weight in my chest. I backed out of the cabin slowly, my eyes scanning every corner of the unsettling interior before my gaze was pulled back to that impossible track. It wasn't just Old Man Miller's cabin that felt wrong. It was the whole damn forest. Every pine needle, every drift of snow seemed to vibrate with a predatory awareness. The rifle felt heavy, yet flimsy, against the sheer ancient horror that was now a tangible presence. I didn't turn my back on the cabin until I was well clear, crunching my way through the snow towards my snowmobile. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the impossible with the undeniable. Wendigos. It was the stuff of nightmares, of campfire tales whispered to scare naive campers. Not real, not in Blackwood National Park. Yet, the evidence was staring me in the face. The unnatural disappearances, the unholy cold, the broken cabin, and that track. My radio crackled to life, startling me so violently I almost dropped the rifle. Ranger Jenkins, this is Hayes. Status report. You're late checking in. Superintendent Hayes' voice was tinny, impatient, utterly disconnected from the living nightmare I was wading through. I hesitated, struggling to form words, to compress the madness of the last hour into something he'd understand. Hayes, I managed, my voice rough. I'm at the Northwood outpost. It's compromised. Miller's gone. There's evidence of something unusual. Unusual. His voice sharpened with irritation. Jenkins, are you implying a bear, or perhaps a particularly large wolf? I need clear, concise information, not ranger speculation. And you are to prioritize securing the site, not fabricating stories. The sheer, infuriating blindness of his bureaucratic mind almost made me scream. It's not an animal, Hayes, I snapped, the words tumbling out. There's a track in the cabin. It's not human, and it's not animal. It's a footprint, but twisted. And there's a deer hoof, cleanly severed, on Miller's bed. A beat of stunned silence from his end, then a low chuckle. Jenkins, have you been out in the cold too long? Look, just secure the cabin, mark it off. I'll send a team out tomorrow for a proper investigation. We've got more disappearances to worry about. Another 2 hikers reported missing near Ravens Peak just an hour ago. Search and rescue is being deployed first light. The news hit me like a physical blow. 2 more, near Ravens Peak. The same place the old-timers warned about. The same direction the unspeakable moan had come from. My eyes darted to the ominous silhouette of the peak, barely visible through the darkening twilight. The blood drained from my face. They were sending search and rescue, unarmed and unaware, straight into the maw of whatever took Miller. No, I yelled into the radio, the single word echoing in the vast silence. Hayes, listen to me. Don't send them. Whatever took Miller, whatever is here, it's not a natural predator. It's too dangerous. They'll be walking into a trap. That's enough, Jenkins, Hayes' voice boomed, cutting through my frantic warning. Your shift is over. Return to base immediately. That's an order. The radio went dead, his decision final. My hand trembled as I lowered the radio. An order. Return to base. Leave these people, these lost souls, to whatever abomination now stalked Blackwood. Leave the search and rescue team to their grim fate? No, I couldn't. Not when I finally understood. The whispers on the wind, the deepening cold, the gnawing hunger that radiated from the Northwood. It wasn't just a legend anymore. It was real, and it was hunting. And it was heading for Raven's Peak, where fresh prey would soon be delivered right to its doorstep. I looked at the deactivated snowmobile, then at the rifle in my hand. My duty called me back to base, to safety. But my conscience, my very soul, screamed at me to go towards the peak, to try and warn them, to somehow stand against the impossible. The freezing wind seemed to carry that low, guttural moan again. Closer this time, a hungry promise. I knew what I had to do. My decision was made the moment Hayes' voice cut out. Orders be damned. I couldn't leave those people, innocents stumbling into a horror they couldn't possibly fathom. The snowmobile felt too slow, too loud, too conspicuous for what I was about to face. I strapped my rifle securely to my back, grabbed my pack, and started towards Raven's Peak on foot, opting for the silent, arduous climb through the deepening drifts. The ascent was brutal. The terrain grew steeper, the snow deeper, clinging to my snowshoes like lead weights. The wind picked up, howling through the ancient pines, a mournful, hungry sound that seemed to mock my futile efforts. Every muscle screamed in protest, but I pushed on, driven by a desperate urgency. Time was running out. Search and rescue would be here by dawn, a full 3 hours from now, maybe 4, given the weather. That was 3 or 4 hours the thing had to hunt. As I climbed higher, the air grew thinner, colder. The trees twisted into grotesque, skeletal shapes, their branches laden with impossibly heavy snow, looking like gnarled, frozen limbs reaching out to drag me down. The scent that had permeated Miller's cabin returned, stronger now, a sickening mix of stale blood and something else. Something profoundly unnatural, like ozone mixed with decay. It prickled my nose, burning the back of my throat. This was the scent of its territory. Then I heard it again, closer this time. The moan. It wasn't human. It was too raw, too resonant, carrying an ancient, boundless suffering and an equally ancient, boundless hunger. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a sound woven into the very fabric of the desolate landscape. It echoed off the sheer rock faces of the peak, a chilling symphony of despair. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. My flashlight beam cut through the swirling snow, revealing nothing but the endless, unforgiving white. I scrambled over a ridge, losing my footing momentarily, sliding down into a small, sheltered hollow. As I struggled to regain my balance, my boot snagged on something beneath the snow. I knelt, scraping away the fresh powder, and froze. It was a glove, a thin, brightly colored hiking glove, one of those flashy, high-tech ones tourists favored. And next to it, partially buried, was a section of a trekking pole, snapped clean in half. Fresh, very fresh. These were from the newly missing hikers. A cold dread, unlike any I'd ever known, washed over me. It wasn't just near Raven's Peak. It was on Raven's Peak. The creature was hunting here now, perhaps waiting for the sun to set completely before it truly moved. The air grew heavy, thick with an unseen presence. My breath plumed raggedly, my eyes darting frantically into the deepening shadows. Then, a new sound. A rustling, light as dry leaves, but impossibly fast, coming from the tree line directly above me. My head snapped up. The sound moved, circling the hollow, too quick to track with my eyes. It wasn't a bear crashing through brush, or a deer bounding. It was too agile, too unnervingly silent, save for that subtle whisper rustle. My blood ran cold. It was playing with me, watching, waiting. I brought the rifle up, aiming blindly into the darkness where the sound had come from. "Show yourself," I yelled, my voice cracking, swallowed instantly by the relentless wind. The only response was the intensifying silence, the heavy, waiting silence of the hunt. And then, a low, rasping chuckle, dry as brittle bones, seemed to echo from all around me. It was cold, so cold, and so utterly, terribly amused. The dry, rattling chuckle solidified my terror. It wasn't the wind, it was intelligent, malevolent. My flashlight beam danced frantically across the trees, but the darkness seemed to cling to the shapes, distorting them, making it impossible to pinpoint the source of the sound. The air grew impossibly cold, the kind of cold that stole the breath from your lungs, leaving them burning. And then I saw it. Movement. A flicker between two ancient pines, too fast, too gaunt to be anything natural. It was a silhouette, unnaturally tall and thin, like a stick figure drawn by a trembling hand. But as it stepped into a sliver of moonlight filtering through the heavy clouds, its true horror solidified. It was impossibly emaciated, its flesh stretched taut over a skeletal frame. Limbs like gnarled branches, ending in hands with elongated, razor-sharp talons. Its head was bare, antler-like growths rising from its skull, but they weren't bone or horn. They were like frozen, desiccated wood, twisted and sharp. Its eyes, deep set in sunken sockets, glowed with a faint, malevolent light, a hungry, ancient ember that promised nothing but unending consumption. It smelled of rot, of frozen earth, and of that sickeningly sweet clawing scent that had clung to Miller's cabin. It was a Wendigo, not a story, not a myth. It was real. A high-pitched shriek tore from its throat, a sound that flayed my nerves raw, a sound woven with centuries of starvation and agony. It didn't charge. It moved with a horrifying loping grace, circling the hollow, its movements too fluid, too inhuman. It wasn't hunting me with brute force. It was playing, taunting, enjoying the exquisite torment of its prey. My hands, numb with cold and terror, fought with the safety on my rifle. Click, ready. I raised the weapon, the familiar weight a small anchor in the maelstrom of my fear. My aim was shaky, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I fired. The shot ripped through the pristine silence, a deafening crack that momentarily startled the creature. It recoiled, a low, injured growl rumbling in its chest, but it wasn't hit. Or if it was, it felt nothing. Its eyes, those glowing coals, locked onto mine, burning with an intensified hunger. "Get out of my park," I screamed, the words raw, meaningless against its ancient evil. I fired again and again, emptying the clip in a desperate, futile attempt to drive it back. Each bullet seemed to pass through air or deflect harmlessly off its skeletal frame. It was impervious. The Wendigo moved, not towards me, but past me, a blur of skeletal limbs heading directly for the path that led to Raven's Peak, the path the search and rescue team would take. It understood. It knew fresh prey was coming. Panic, cold and pure, surged through me. I scrambled, fumbling for a fresh magazine, my fingers clumsy with frostbite and fear. I had to warn them. I had to. But the creature was too fast, already disappearing into the shadowy ascent. My rifle felt useless, my training insufficient. Then a distant sound, faint but unmistakable, the rhythmic thumping of rotor blades, the search and rescue helicopter. They were early, too early. They would be here in minutes, right into the Wendigo's trap. I fired a final, desperate shot into the air, a futile attempt to signal, to warn. Then, abandoning the useless rifle, I pulled the emergency flare gun from my pack. My fingers fumbled with the cold metal, shaking, but I managed to load a flare. With a prayer, I aimed it high, directly over Raven's Peak, and fired. A brilliant, burning red star streaked into the night sky, momentarily illuminating the ominous peak before bursting with a shower of sparks. It was a distress signal, unmistakable. It would divert the helicopter, make them cautious, make them land miles away, giving them a chance. It bought time. The Wendigo's shriek, now closer, was one of enraged frustration. It knew what I had done. Its glowing eyes fixed on me from the shadows of the ridge, a silent promise of eternal retribution. I didn't wait. I turned, stumbling through the deep snow, running not towards safety, but away from the peak, drawing its attention, becoming the bait. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I kept going, driven by the memory of Miller's cabin, the deer hoof, and the terrifying knowledge that some horrors were real and they hunted in the deep, silent cold. I wouldn't stop until I knew the others were safe, or until the hunger finally caught me.